In the spring of the year 1901, a crew of Greek sponge divers hauled a shapeless, corroded lump of bronze up out of an ancient shipwreck at the bottom of the Aegean Sea. And for decades afterward, not a single person on Earth truly understood what it was. It was carried to a museum in Athens, where it sat in a drawer, ignored and slowly crumbling, a broken mass of green metal that looked like nothing at all, just another worthless scrap pulled from a 2,000-year-old wreck. But hidden inside that unremarkable lump was something that, by every rule we thought we understood, should not have existed at all. Something that would eventually force historians to tear up and rewrite the entire story of human technology. For sealed within the corrosion was a machine, a device of dozens of precisely cut bronze gears, meshing together in layers of almost impossible complexity, designed and assembled by human hands more than 2,000 years ago. It could track the movements of the sun, the moon, and the wandering planets across the sky. It could predict eclipses years into the future. It was, in every meaningful sense of the word, an ancient computer made of bronze. And nothing else even remotely like it would appear anywhere on the face of the Earth for more than 1,000 years to come. This is the story, and the enduring mystery, of the Antikythera Mechanism. To understand where it came from, the story begins in the year 1900, off a tiny, rocky Greek island called Antikythera, a lonely speck of land caught in open water between Crete and the mainland. A crew of Greek sponge divers, on their long voyage home and driven off course by a sudden storm, had anchored in the shelter of the island to wait for the weather to break. To pass the time, one of the divers pulled on his heavy canvas suit and his round brass helmet, took hold of his air line, and dropped over the side of the boat, down into the deep blue water. He sank down into the gloom, 45 meters below the surface, far deeper than was truly safe, until at last the dark seabed rose up out of the shadows to meet his feet. And there, half buried in the sand in front of him, he saw them. Bronze and marble arms, legs, and faces, reaching silently up out of the seabed in the darkness, like a drowned field of the dead. He had stumbled onto a shipwreck, an ancient Roman-era cargo ship that had gone down here around 60 years before the birth of Christ, its hold packed full of priceless Greek treasure. Over the following months, in dive after dangerous dive, the divers brought up spectacular treasures from the wreck. Life-sized bronze statues, marble figures, delicate glassware, gold jewelry, and coins. It was one of the single greatest hauls of ancient art ever recovered from the sea. And amid all of that dazzling beauty, almost nobody paid any attention to a small, shapeless, corroded lump of bronze. It was set aside with the broken and worthless fragments and left to sit in the museum in Athens, while the scholars of Europe marveled instead at the magnificent recovered statues. Then, several months later, the neglected lump cracked and split apart as it slowly dried out. And deep inside the broken metal, a sharp-eyed scholar saw something that made absolutely no sense at all. A gear. A finely toothed bronze ging wheel, precisely made, of a kind that simply should not have existed anywhere in the entire ancient world. Gears of this kind belong to the age of clockwork, to Renaissance Europe and the centuries beyond it, more than 1,000 years into the future. And yet here one sat, buried in a shipwreck older than the Roman Empire. For most of the following century, the fragile corroded fragments stubbornly guarded their secret. The ancient bronze was simply too fragile, and too fused together by the sea, for anyone to safely take it apart. It was only much later, when scientists finally turned X-rays, and then powerful three-dimensional medical scanners, onto the fragments, that the machine hidden inside them at last began to give up its secrets. And what those scans revealed was absolutely breathtaking. Inside, packed tightly into a wooden case no larger than a shoebox, were more than 30 separate interlocking bronze gears. Every single gear had been cut entirely by hand, its triangular teeth shaped and filed one at a time. Some of the gears were no larger than a coin, and they meshed together in layers of staggering precision. On the front face of the machine was a great circular dial, carefully engraved with the 12 signs of the zodiac and, running alongside them, the days of the Egyptian calendar year. Sweeping across that dial were a set of delicate bronze pointers, and each one of those pointers showed the exact position, on any day you chose, of one particular body moving through the heavens. One pointer faithfully tracked the sun, another tracked the moon, and still more pointers tracked each of the 5 planets known to the ancient world: Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. A small rotating ball, one half of it polished silver and the other half painted black, even displayed the current phase of the moon, waxing and waning in perfect step with the real moon in the night sky. And here the ancient engineers who built this machine did something that is almost unbelievable. They understood, and accounted for, the fact that the moon does not move at a single steady speed across the sky. The moon speeds up and then slows down again as it travels along its slightly oval path around the Earth. And these ancient makers found a way to build that subtle, irregular motion directly into the bronze itself. Using an ingenious little pin and slot device, in which one gear turns another from slightly off its center, they reproduced the moon's constantly changing speed across the sky with uncanny, almost eerie accuracy. It was a single piece of mechanical genius so far ahead of its time that nothing like it would be seen again anywhere in the entire human record for well over 1,000 years. But the elaborate front of the machine was only half of the wonder. On the back were two more great spiral dials, and their purpose turned out to be even more astonishing than the first. The upper spiral was a calendar that tracked a 19-year cycle, the exact span of time in which the sun and the moon return, almost perfectly, to the very same alignment in the sky. It kept the shorter lunar months and the longer solar year locked in perfect step with one another, solving the very same stubborn problem that human calendars would go on struggling with for many centuries to come. And the lower spiral on the back did something that, to anyone who did not understand the mechanism, must have looked like pure and simple prophecy. It predicted eclipses. By carefully tracking a repeating cycle of about 18 years, the machine could tell its owner, years and years in advance, exactly when the sun or the moon would be swallowed up by shadow. It even went so far as to note whether a given eclipse would come by day or by night, and what color the moon might turn during it, all of it engraved in tiny, careful letters across the bronze. And scattered across the dials, right alongside all of the astronomy, were marked the dates of the great athletic games of the Greek world, including the ancient Olympic Games themselves. This was not only a precise instrument of the heavens, it was a machine that quietly held the entire rhythm of a whole civilization, its calendar, its sacred festivals, its games, and its cosmos, all turning together. And to work this astonishing machine, to set the entire cosmos in motion, you simply reached out and turned a small hand crank on the side of the wooden case. And as you turned that little crank, the whole sky began to move. Every pointer, every dial, and every hidden gear turned together at once, carrying the sun, the moon, and the planets to their exact place on any date you wished. You could wind it forward into the distant future or turn it back into the deep past. In a single box that you could hold in your two hands, the ancient Greeks had captured the working machinery of the heavens. It was a thing of almost impossible sophistication for its age. And that impossible sophistication raises the single question that still haunts everyone who takes the time to study it closely. Who on earth could possibly have designed and built such an extraordinary thing more than 2,000 years ago, with nothing but hand tools and bronze? We do not know his name, and we almost certainly never will. But the mechanism itself, and the remarkable world that produced it, together offer us a series of tantalizing clues. It was built in the brilliant world of Hellenistic Greece, in the last few centuries before the birth of Christ, an age of extraordinary science and mathematics that we, today, far too often forget ever existed. This was the world of Archimedes and of Euclid and of all their many brilliant heirs, a world of geometers and astronomers who mapped the wandering stars and even measured the size of the whole Earth. The Roman writer Cicero himself described machines, built by Archimedes and by others, that mechanically modeled the motions of the sun, the moon, and the planets, doing exactly what this very device does. For a very long time, historians quietly assumed those ancient accounts were nothing more than exaggeration and legend. The Antikythera Mechanism is the solid, physical proof that they were telling the simple, literal truth. Many scholars now trace the machine back to the island of Rhodes, which was, in this period, a dazzling and famous center of Greek astronomy, engineering, and learning. For it was on Rhodes that the great astronomer Hipparchus, one of the finest scientific minds of the ancient world, had painstakingly worked out his brilliant theory of the moon's uneven, changing motion. That is the very same uneven motion that the machine so cleverly reproduces in turning bronze. It is almost as if the mechanism physically carries his abstract ideas, translated into metal, gears, and moving pointers. And the ship that was carrying the mechanism when it sank was sailing westward, toward Rome, most likely loaded down with Greek treasures bound for the villa of some fabulously wealthy Roman buyer. Perhaps the mechanism was a treasured possession, a genuine marvel of Greek science being carried across the sea to grace a Roman mansion, when a sudden storm rose up and the sea took it, and the whole ship, instead. But the deepest mystery of all is not really the question of who made this single machine. It is the far more unsettling question of how many others there once must have been. A device this refined and this perfected is almost never anyone's very first attempt. Its precision quietly speaks of long experience, of earlier and cruder machines, of an entire tradition of skilled makers now utterly lost to us. So how many such machines were quietly built, and used, and then eventually melted down for their bronze, or simply lost, or left to crumble slowly away into unrecognizable green lumps of corroded metal? We will almost certainly never know the answer. This single one survived by nothing more than pure blind chance, protected and hidden for 2,000 years at the bottom of the sea. Had that unlucky ship only reached its harbor safely, the mechanism would very likely have been melted down for its metal within a generation, and we today would never even have known that such a thing had ever existed. And that is the truly humbling heart of this entire story, because after this one machine sank beneath the waves, the hard-won knowledge that had built it slowly began to fade out of the world. The brilliant Hellenistic Golden Age eventually gave way to the long turmoil and collapse of the falling ancient world. Great libraries burned, famous schools closed their doors, and countless irreplaceable works of science were lost forever. The delicate, difficult art of cutting precise interlocking gears, and of modeling the entire heavens in turning bronze, simply and quietly vanished from human hands altogether. And that lost art did not truly return for well over 1,000 long years, until the first great astronomical clocks slowly began to appear in the stone cathedrals of medieval Europe. A full 1,000 years. That is how long it took all of humanity to slowly rebuild what one single, anonymous Greek craftsman had already quietly achieved before the Roman Empire had even finished rising. The Antikythera Mechanism is not, in the end, evidence of aliens, or of some impossible lost super-civilization out of legend. The real truth of it is somehow far more profound, and far more human, than that. It is the solid, undeniable proof that ordinary human beings, more than 2,000 years ago, were quietly capable of very much more than we have ever really given them credit for. That the ancient world genuinely reached astonishing heights of science and engineering, heights that were then completely forgotten, and had to be painfully rediscovered, all over again, centuries later. And it quietly forces us to confront a genuinely unsettling question of our own. How much precious knowledge has all of humanity gained, and then carelessly lost again, across the long, winding span of our history? How many brilliant discoveries were made, and then forgotten, and then slowly made all over again, simply because the fragile thread of human learning was cut somewhere by war, or by fire, or by the passing of time? The Antikythera Mechanism is the one lucky survivor. It is the single surviving piece of physical proof that somehow slipped through all the cracks of history and, against every odds, reached us at last. A single, corroded, utterly extraordinary machine, quietly whispering to us across 2,000 years that the people of the ancient world were so very much more than we had ever dared to imagine. It reminds us that the human past is not a simple, comforting story of steady, unbroken progress, but something far more fragile, a precious inheritance, easily lost, and very hard to win back again. 2,000 years ago, some forgotten genius built the moving heavens themselves out of nothing but bronze. And by the very barest thread of pure chance, we were somehow allowed to remember that they truly could.